Looking back, it's pretty hilarious how long we managed to keep up the act. I mean, there we were, casually folding space-time while pretending we'd just figured out how to rub two rocks together. The whole thing started back in 2157, during my stint as Earth's diplomatic liaison to the galactic community. That's a fancy way of saying I was humanity's designated village idiot. My name's Max Henderson, and my job was to convince the galaxy that humans were just adorable little space babies who needed their hands held through the basics of interstellar civilization. Trust me, it's harder than it sounds to play dumb when your morning commute involves quantum tunneling through 11 dimensions. I remember that first day like it was yesterday. There I was, stationed at our primitive orbital facility, the kind that just happened to have artificial gravity that worked perfectly fine, but we had to pretend was malfunctioning every few hours to keep up appearances. The whole station was a masterpiece of deception. We had holographic projectors making our quantum computers look like they ran on vacuum tubes, and our matter replicators were disguised as vending machines that would occasionally spark and smoke for effect. Mr. Henderson, my AI assistant chimed in through my neural implant, which I definitely wasn't supposed to have. The Galactic Council representatives will be arriving in approximately 20 minutes. Thanks, Arkansas IA, I subvocalized. And remember, for the next few hours, you're just a simple verbal interface program. Think less omniscient artificial intelligence and more slightly confused calculator. Understood. Shall I begin degrading my speech patterns and occasionally misinterpret basic commands? Perfect. And don't forget to make that old dial-up modem sound they love so much. I straightened my intentionally wrinkled uniform and headed to the docking bay. Along the way, I passed Tom Rodriguez, our chief science officer, who was busy applying some authentically ancient LED strips to our quantum illumination panels. Looking good, Tom. Real retro. He grinned, attaching another strip with deliberate crookedness. Thanks. I stayed up all night researching 21st century lighting techniques. Did you know they used to actually change physical bulbs when they burned out? Like cavemen. Speaking of cavemen, I said, checking my archaic tablet display, we've got about 15 minutes to finish dumbing down this place. How's the medical bay coming along? Oh, you're going to love this, Tom chuckled. We've got actual stethoscopes on display, real ones. And we replaced all the cellular regeneration pods with what appears to be a primitive MRI machine. It makes these fantastic clunking noises. I had to admit we'd gotten pretty good at this whole charade over the years. The trick was in the details, like the carefully curated collection of space junk we kept in orbit around the station. Most of it was actually cutting-edge sensor equipment disguised as defunct satellites, but we'd throw in a few genuine pieces of old tech just to keep things authentic. The station's warning system, deliberately downgraded from its usual telepathic broadcast, crackled through ancient speakers. Attention all personnel. Galactic Council vessel approaching. Please ensure all advanced technology is properly concealed. Repeat. Please ensure all advanced technology is properly concealed. I watched through the observation window as their ship approached. It was a Drachnid vessel, all sleek lines and imposing presence. They thought it was the pinnacle of space travel technology. We'd built better ships as children's toys, but that was beside the point. Okay, everyone, I announced to the gathering crew. Remember the basics. We're barely past chemical rockets. Fusion power is exciting and new. And for the love of everything, please act impressed when they show us their FTL drive. We've got reputations to maintain as the galaxy's most endearing technological backwater. The docking procedure began, and I could already see the Drachnid ambassador's face through the airlock window, wearing that familiar expression of benevolent superiority that always made me want to accidentally let slip that we'd solved unified field theory while they were still working out the kinks in their warp drives. But that wasn't my job. My job was to keep humanity's true capabilities under wraps, no matter how ridiculous it felt. After all, we had our reasons for maintaining this facade. Very good reasons that definitely made sense and weren't just because we thought it was hilarious. I put on my best, amazed by basic technology face and prepared to greet our guests. Another day of playing galactic charades was about to begin, and I was determined to win an award for my performance. The airlock cycled, and I reminded myself to look impressed by the process. Time to put on the greatest show in the galaxy, the story of how humanity, masters of the universe, convinced everyone we were still trying to figure out which end of a spaceship went forward. The airlock opened with a satisfyingly clunky sound. We'd specifically engineered it to be noisier than necessary, just for effect. Out stepped Ambassador Krelax, all 7 feet of scaled diplomatic superiority. followed by their junior aide Zartak, who looked about as excited as a xenobiologist at a first contact ceremony. "Greetings, esteemed human representatives," Krelax announced, their universal translator making that familiar scratchy sound that we could have fixed in about 5 minutes if we weren't committed to our role. "Ambassador," I gasped, making sure to stumble slightly over my own feet as I approached. "We are so honored by your presence. Your ship, it's incredible. Did it really travel faster than light? The calculations for that must be, well, I can't even imagine." Behind me, I heard the distinctive sound of Dr. Rodriguez accidentally dropping a tablet. Right on cue. Krelax's chest swelled with pride. "Indeed, young species, the principles of faster-than-light travel are quite complex. Perhaps in a few centuries, your people will begin to grasp the fundamental concepts." I bit my tongue to keep from mentioning that my daughter's first science fair project involved building a working FTL drive out of spare parts from our garage. She got second place. The winning project was a device that could alter the cosmic background radiation of a localized space-time bubble. Kids these days, so ambitious. "Now then," Krelax continued, "we're here to evaluate your species' progress. The Galactic Council is very interested in your unique development path." Of course," I gestured toward our main control room. "Would you like to see our most advanced computing system? We're very proud of it." As we walked, I sent a quick neural signal to Arya to initiate protocol Make It Look Dumb. The quantum supercomputer that usually ran the station immediately began displaying deliberately slow calculations on ancient LCD screens. "Behold," I announced with practiced enthusiasm, "it can perform over 10,000 calculations per second." Zartak leaned forward, their antenna twitching suspiciously. "Only 10,000? But your atmospheric processors would require at least—" "Would you like to see our cafeteria?" I interrupted quickly. "We've recently figured out how to heat food without setting it on fire, most of the time." The tour continued in this vein, with each demonstration more elaborately understated than the last. We showed them our prototype gravity generators, which we pretended worked only intermittently. In reality, we were using handheld devices to create localized gravity fluctuations just to sell the effect. The real challenge came when we reached the research wing. Dr. Jenny Park was waiting for us, and she was notorious for being terrible at maintaining our technological facade. Last month, she'd nearly blown our cover by absent-mindedly mentioning quantum entanglement, while trying to explain why the coffee maker wasn't working. "Welcome," Jenny beamed, standing in front of what appeared to be a simple microscope but was actually a device capable of examining parallel universes. "Would you like to see how we've learned to make very small things look bigger?" I held my breath. Jenny had a habit of getting excited about science and forgetting our primitive status. "Fascinating," Krelax murmured, peering through the eyepiece. "And you use this for biological research?" "Oh yes," Jenny replied. "Just yesterday we were studying the quantum state of— we were looking at very small swimming things, in water, with tails. Very exciting." I shot her a warning look, but the damage was already done. Zartak's antennae were practically vibrating with suspicion now. "Did you say quantum state?" they asked, their voice sharp with interest. She meant quantum as in very small. I jumped in. "It's our new favorite word. We just learned it last week. We use it for everything now. Quantum lunch. Quantum paperwork. We're not entirely sure what it means." Krelax nodded sympathetically, but Zartak wasn't so easily convinced. They began examining every piece of equipment more closely, forcing me to come up with increasingly ridiculous explanations for our technology. "Oh, that's our backup power system. It runs on processed algae, very green. Sometimes it explodes, but in an environmentally friendly way. And this device? Would you believe it's actually just a very shiny box? We keep it around because it looks impressive. Sometimes we put smaller boxes inside it." The day was quickly becoming the most stressful game of technological hide-and-seek I'd ever played. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I couldn't help but wonder how long we could keep this charade going before someone finally caught on to the fact that humanity had actually figured out most of the universe's mysteries. We just thought it was more fun to pretend we hadn't. The tour was going about as well as could be expected, which is to say we were barely keeping our technological sophistication under wraps. Things really started to unravel when we reached the engineering section, where our chief engineer, Doug Martinez, was supposed to be demonstrating our primitive propulsion systems. Instead, we found him deep in conversation with his personal AI about theoretical physics. in Spanish, which wouldn't have been a problem, except Zartak happened to be a xenolinguistics expert. And that's why the quantum fluctuations in the 11th dimension affect the... Doug was saying before I loudly cleared my throat. He spun around, eyes widening as he saw our guests. Oh, I was just practicing my poetry about rockets. Very simple rockets. That use fire? Zartak's antenna twitched again. Fascinating. Your poetry includes remarkably accurate descriptions of quantum mechanical principles. What? No. I laughed nervously. That's just how Spanish works. Everything sounds like quantum mechanics in Spanish. Very poetic language. Before Zartak could reply, a familiar alarm started blaring throughout the station. Not our fake alarm for the visitors, the real one. The one that meant actual trouble. Don't worry, I shouted over the noise. This happens all the time. Just our lunch notification system gets a bit excited. But Ambassador Krelax was already pulling out some sort of scanning device. I'm detecting a massive energy surge in your research sector. The readings are off the scale. Of course they were. Dr. Park had probably forgotten to activate the dampers on her dimensional research equipment. Again. Off what scale? I asked innocently. Because our scales only go up to 10, so... This is reading at least level 15 containment breach potential, Zartak exclaimed. Oh, that's not so bad, Doug chimed in helpfully. Last week we hit level 27 when Jenny was trying to prove string theory during her coffee break. I stepped on his foot. Hard. What my colleague means is that our measuring systems are very unreliable. Probably just the microwave running too close to the hamster wheel that powers our backup generators. But it was too late. Krelax and Zartak were already rushing toward the research sector, their long legs carrying them faster than I could follow while maintaining my physically unaugmented human facade. By the time I caught up, Dr. Park was standing in front of what appeared to be a small tear in the fabric of reality, trying to look innocent. Jenny, I said with all the patience I could muster, what did we say about ripping holes in space-time while we have guests? It's not a tear in reality, she protested. It's just a very aggressive light bulb. Krelax was staring at their scanning device in disbelief. This is impossible. These readings suggest you've achieved stable manipulation of fundamental forces that even our most advanced scientists have only theorized about. Would you believe we did it by accident? I offered. We were trying to build a better coffee maker, and things just sort of happened? A coffee maker, Zartak repeated flatly. Yes. You see, humans are very passionate about coffee. Sometimes this passion leads to accidental breakthroughs in theoretical physics. We try not to think too hard about it. Thinking hard makes our heads hurt. Jenny, bless her brilliant but terrible at deception heart, chose this moment to mutter, well, technically, if you consider the implications for M-theory. For making coffee, I practically shouted. She's talking about making coffee. Humans can't even spell mythery. In fact, we're not entirely sure about the letter M in general. Still working on that one. The dimensional tier chose that exact moment to hiccup, briefly revealing what appeared to be a fully operational Dyson sphere in an alternate universe. One that had property of Dr. Jennifer Park don't touch clearly labeled on it. That's just a screensaver. I tried. Zartak's antenna were now practically tied in knots. A screensaver. For your aggressive light bulb. That somehow involves a perfectly engineered Dyson sphere. We're very serious about our screensavers, Doug added. Almost as serious as we are about coffee. I was running out of excuses, and frankly my neural implant was getting a headache from all the emergency signals it was sending to our damage control systems. But just as Krelax opened their mouth to undoubtedly call us out on our technological charade, a priority alert flashed across everyone's consciousness, or in the case of our guests, their primitive handheld devices. A massive asteroid previously undetected was on a direct collision course with one of the most populated worlds in the Galactic Council space. And suddenly, maintaining our facade of technological incompetence became the least of our problems. Though I did have to stop Jenny from immediately rattling off 3 different ways to solve the crisis using simple quantum mechanics. The emergency alert threw our entire station into carefully orchestrated chaos. And by carefully orchestrated, I mean we had to pretend we weren't already solving the problem while looking appropriately panicked about our inability to help. This is terrible, I exclaimed, watching the holographic projection of the asteroid's path, which we quickly switched to a much less sophisticated 2D screen when Krelax looked our way. If only we had some way to help. But alas, We're just a primitive species who barely understands how rocks work. Ambassador Creolax was already on their communication device, barking orders in that distinctly superior tone they reserved for crisis management. All available Council ships are being diverted to attempt an intercept, but the nearest vessels are 3 days out. The asteroid will impact in 64 hours. 3 days? Jenny whispered to me. I could redirect that rock in my sleep with a handheld tractor beam. Not helping, I whispered back. Zartak was furiously analyzing data on their devices. The asteroid's composition is primarily dense metals. Our standard deflection protocols may not be sufficient. I could practically see Jenny vibrating with the effort of not pointing out 17 different ways to handle dense metal asteroids. She settled for stress chewing on a stylus that just happened to be a disguised matter manipulator. Perhaps. Creolax began diplomatically. Your species has some insight to offer? Sometimes primitive perspectives can be refreshingly simple. Oh well. I made a show of thinking very hard. Have you tried asking the asteroid nicely to go away? The look of pained patience on Creolax's face was almost worth it. Almost. Meanwhile, I was getting emergency pings from Earth's actual defense command. They were, understandably, a bit concerned about maintaining our technological facade while a populated world was at risk. The internal debate was heating up. We can't just let billions die to maintain our cover. That was from Admiral Chen. But revealing our capabilities could have long-term consequences for humanity's position in the galaxy. General Roberts countered. What if we just pretend to solve it by accident? Someone suggested. You know, like we usually do? Can we blame it on coffee again? I rubbed my temples, wondering how to handle this without giving away the fact that humanity had already deployed 3 different solutions and was just waiting to see which one would look the most accidental. Mr. Henderson, Creolax's voice snapped me back to the present crisis. Your station's primitive sensors must be able to detect the asteroid by now. What readings are you getting? Oh, yes, let me check our rock detecting device. I made a show of walking over to our deliberately dumbed-down sensor array. It appears to be very big. And rocky. With metal. In space. Zartak looked like they were getting a headache. Could you perhaps be more specific? It's moving that way? I pointed vaguely. Very fast. Faster than we can count, actually. We're still working on numbers past 1,000. Just then, Dr. Park, who had been suspiciously quiet, spoke up. What if we just happened to be testing our new mining laser at exactly the right moment and accidentally hit the asteroid? I shot her a warning look, but she continued. I mean, purely hypothetically, if we were to accidentally fire our totally primitive and barely functional mining laser for completely unrelated reasons. Your station has a mining laser? Creolax asked sharply. More of a mining flashlight, really, I interjected quickly. Sometimes we use it to signal other stations, when we remember which end to point. But Jenny was on a roll now. And what if this mining laser just happened to hit the exact resonance frequency needed to disrupt the asteroid's molecular structure? Hypothetically. By accident. Because of coffee. I watched with a mix of horror and resignation as both Creolax and Zar Tak's expressions shifted from confusion to suspicion to dawning realization. We were either about to blow our cover spectacularly or pull off the greatest accidental save in human history. And somewhere in orbit around Earth, I knew 3 different asteroid-eliminating devices were waiting for my signal, while humanity's leadership debated whether this was finally the moment to drop our technological charade. I just hoped whatever we decided, we could blame it on coffee somehow. We had a reputation to maintain, after all. The next few hours were a masterclass in pretending to be helpfully unhelpful. Earth's leadership had finally reached a decision. We would save the planet, but make it look like the biggest technological bumble in human history. Okay, everyone, I announced to our station crew while our guests were distracted by their own calculations. Time to execute Operation Whoopsie. Dr. Park was practically bouncing with excitement. I've already calibrated the mining flashlight to accidentally hit the exact right spot on the asteroid. Remember, I warned, we need this to look completely unintentional. Doug, how's our routine maintenance test coming along? Oh, it's going great, Doug grinned. I've got the quantum field generators disguised as faulty air conditioning units, and they're making some very convincing sparking noises. Meanwhile, Creolax and Zartak were growing increasingly frustrated with their own attempts to solve the crisis. I almost felt bad for them. Almost. The closest Council ships are still 47 hours away, Zartak reported grimly. Even at maximum speed, they won't arrive in time. Such a shame, I said, shaking my head. If only someone had invented some way to move ships faster, or move asteroids slower, or maybe both at the same time through quantum tunneling. I mean, through the power of positive thinking. Jenny chose that moment to trip over her own feet and crash into what appeared to be a simple control panel. Somehow, this resulted in our mining flashlight powering up with a series of increasingly alarming noises. "Oops," she exclaimed with all the acting skill of a particularly unconvincing tree in a school play. "I appear to have accidentally activated our completely harmless mining device. How embarrassing." "What's happening?" Krelax demanded as the station's lights flickered dramatically, on cue, thanks to Doug's excellent timing. "Oh, you know how it is with primitive technology," I said casually. "You push one wrong button and suddenly you're accidentally generating a precision beam of quantum-entangled particles that, a very bright light that goes zoom." The mining flashlight fired, accompanied by appropriate sound effects that we'd specifically designed to sound both impressive and slightly broken. The beam shot out into space, seemingly at random. "You're firing an unknown energy beam in a random direction during an orbital crisis?" Talk's antenna were practically doing gymnastics now. "Would you believe we're trying to signal for help using Morse code?" "That beam is heading directly toward the asteroid," they pointed out. "Is it? What a fascinating coincidence. Humans are very lucky that way. Did you know we discovered fire by complete accident? We've been accidentally discovering things ever since." Right on schedule, our random beam hit the asteroid. The effect was immediate and, thanks to some quick work from our special effects team, appropriately spectacular. The asteroid began to break apart in exactly the way we'd calculated it would, forming smaller pieces that would harmlessly burn up in the atmosphere. All according to plan, though I made sure to look appropriately shocked. "Oh no," I gasped. "Our primitive mining flashlight appears to have accidentally saved an entire planet. How embarrassing. We'll submit the appropriate paperwork for improper use of industrial lighting equipment right away." Krelax was staring at the sensor readings in disbelief. "This is impossible. The precision required to hit exactly the right point, with exactly the right amount of energy." "Really lucky accident," Doug chimed in. "Must be all that coffee we drink. Makes our hands shake. Sometimes we accidentally solve complex astronomical problems that way." "You expect us to believe," Zartak said slowly, "that you accidentally fired a perfect shot, with perfect timing, using technology you shouldn't even be able to understand, let alone possess? Believe?" I laughed nervously. "We're not even sure what we did. Look, some of us are still trying to figure out which end of a spoon to use. This was probably just one of those cosmic coincidences, like evolution, or pizza." But I could see in their eyes that the game was up. We'd pushed our luck too far. There was no way they were going to believe this was just another happy accident in humanity's long history of convenient technological stumbles. And then something completely unexpected happened. Something that would change everything we thought we knew about our place in the galaxy. Ambassador Krelax started laughing. Ambassador Krelax's laughter echoed through the station, starting as a low rumble and building to what I can only describe as diplomatic hysteria. Zartak looked at their superior with growing alarm, antenna twitching in confusion. "Ambassador?" they ventured cautiously. "Are you? Well?" "Oh, this is too perfect." Krelax wheezed between bouts of laughter. "Simply too perfect. Do you know how long we've been waiting for something like this to happen?" I exchanged confused glances with Jenny and Doug. This wasn't in any of our how to maintain humanity's technological facade protocols. "Waiting for what?" I asked carefully. "For humans to accidentally save a planet with a mining flashlight? We do that sort of thing all the time. Last week, we accidentally solved cold fusion while trying to make better toast." This only made Krelax laugh harder. No. We've been waiting for someone to finally be bad enough at pretending to be primitive that we could stop pretending to believe them." There was a moment of absolute silence in the station. Even our deliberately malfunctioning equipment stopped making noise. "I'm sorry," I said slowly. "You've been pretending to believe our pretending to be primitive?" "Of course we have." Krelax was wiping tears from their eyes now. "Did you really think we believed that a species that couldn't grasp basic quantum mechanics somehow had perfect artificial gravity? Or that your primitive space station just happened to have atmospheric composition identical to your home world down to the molecule?" "Well," I struggled to find words. "We thought we were being pretty convincing." "Convincing?" Zartak snorted, their formal demeanor finally cracking. Last month we watched your primitive society accidentally solve a 300-year-old mathematical proof while allegedly trying to optimize your coffee distribution systems. That actually was an accident, Jenny muttered. We really do take our coffee seriously. But why? I asked. Why pretend to believe us? Krelax straightened up, still chuckling. Because everyone does it. Every advanced species in the galaxy is pretending to be less advanced than they are. The Drachnids, the Varaxians, even the supposedly primitive Blutarians, they developed quantum computing before they invented the wheel, but they still pretend they're working out basic arithmetic. But why? Doug asked, voicing the question we were all thinking. Think about it, Krelax explained. If everyone knew everyone else's true capabilities, we'd have an arms race across the galaxy. This way, we all get to develop at our own pace while maintaining a peaceful balance of power. It's the galaxy's biggest open secret. So when we've been trying to hide our technology, I began. We've been hiding ours too, Zartak finished. Those ships that were 3 days away, they could have been here in minutes. We just didn't want to blow our cover. This is ridiculous, Jenny declared. You mean to tell me that every advanced species in the galaxy is just pretending to be worse at science than they are? Pretty much, Krelax nodded. Though I have to say, humans are particularly bad at it. Your accidental discoveries are a bit too convenient, and you get this gleam in your eyes whenever someone mentions quantum mechanics. We do not, I protested, while absolutely having a gleam in my eye about quantum mechanics. Face it, Henderson, Krelax said kindly. Your species is terrible at playing dumb. But that's okay. We can work with this. Work with what? Well, we could all keep pretending. You pretend to be primitive, we pretend to believe you, everyone else pretends not to notice the pretending. Or we could acknowledge that we're all in on the joke and move forward from there. Though, they added thoughtfully, we should probably keep up appearances for the truly primitive species, and maybe tone down the coffee-related breakthroughs. They're getting a bit obvious. And that's how humanity learned that we weren't actually fooling anyone with our technological charade. We were just participating in the galaxy's longest-running diplomatic theater production without realizing it. These days, we still maintain the facade for the genuinely developing species, but among the advanced civilizations, we've developed a sort of comfortable understanding. We all know we're all pretending, and we're all pretending not to know that we all know. Though I have to say, it's a relief not having to act surprised by basic physics anymore. And Jenny finally got to publish her paper on quantum coffee brewing techniques, under a pseudonym, of course. As for me, I'm still Earth's diplomatic liaison. Only now my job is to pretend to be primitive, which is somehow even more complicated than before. But at least I don't have to hide my neural implants anymore. Well, except when the truly primitive species visit. Then it's right back to, what's a quantum? And, oops, we accidentally solved gravity again. Some traditions are worth keeping after all.